Today is February 11th. This is a meeting of the Water Quality Management Committee. One quick announcement. I am recording this meeting because we no longer have a person that produces the minutes. I'm going to test out my ability to use a program to record the meeting and produce notes. We'll see how it goes, okay? But I just wanted to let you know that it is being recorded. If you have an objection to that, I don't know what to do about it, but just letting you know. First item on the agenda is for us to go into executive session. And of course, I've immediately lost the piece of paper I'm supposed to have. Here we go. We are going to go into an executive session to address a complaint under the open meeting law that was filed by Ron Zweig. I declare that the open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the public body's bargaining or litigating position under General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A3. And we will reconvene to open session upon the conclusion of the executive session. Okay, with that, I need a vote to go into executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Quick question, does have roll? Roll call. So this has to be a roll call vote. How do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
So it's a unanimous group of yeses to go into executive session.
Entirely appropriate to have a closed session to discuss the open meeting law.
The second item on the agenda is a presentation of a proposed plan to prepare an ENF for the townwide watershed plan. It's going to be by Amy Lowell. And then we need a discussion and a vote to support the proposed plan. Amy's working on a fairly tight deadline. And there is much like there is on the outfall, a small group that gets together once a month to keep track of what's going on. And then the expectation is that either Kristen or Amy will show up at this board when there is something substantive on the watershed plan to explain. I put a request into John to be the person on the sort of, I don't know if you call it a working group or just an informational meeting once a month. So John's on the one with the outfall, you're on the urine diversion, you're on the shellfish, I don't know what you're on. Oh, you're on everything. Anyways, so that's where we're at.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Amy Lowell, the Falmouth Wastewater Superintendent, and we're at near the beginning of this project, but it's time to come and talk with you about it. A reminder about the watershed permit regulations, which are sort of have changed the requirements for wastewater planning, watershed management planning, and those regulations were passed back in 2023, and we talked about it a fair amount then. Those regulations designated the watersheds to ponds with total maximum daily loads for nitrogen as nitrogen-sensitive areas. So Falmouth's natural resource nitrogen-sensitive areas are highlighted in blue on this figure, which you can see is most of Falmouth, but not all of Falmouth. So what's in blue is the watersheds to the ponds that have nitrogen TMDLs. So I refer to these as state-designated nitrogen-sensitive areas. There are a couple of other areas in town that, for example, the Board of Health has looked at requiring IAs in, but these are the state-designated nitrogen-sensitive areas that will be planning, that this plan will include a plan to meet the TMDL for. So when the state established these NSAs, these nitrogen-sensitive areas, it required towns to either have IAs installed on all the properties within 5 years, or for the towns to prepare watershed management plans and apply for watershed permits for all of them, all of the NSAs by 2030. And as you, I'm sure, remember, that Falmouth committed to preparing the watershed plans and applying for permits by 2030. So those plans will still involve IAs, but it doesn't involve IAs on every property that is not sewered in Falmouth. So one draft watershed management plan for all of Falmouth's state-designated nitrogen-sensitive areas will include a plan to meet the TMDL for each watershed. It will define the sewer areas and the IA areas in each of those watersheds. There's been a lot of discussion. The town has done an enormous amount of planning in the past for some of these watersheds. And in the Water Quality Management Committee meetings over the last year and a half or so, Kristen Ratjen from Science Ware came in and presented a lot of IA options. So we're not starting at the beginning with this. We have a lot of background. We have a big start on this analysis, but those recommendations had not been finalized previously, or had not been presented as an overall plan and sent out to everybody to review and discuss. So we're going to define those areas and phasing and schedule for each through 2050. And there we will, it's not just, we're not going to just start with one. Obviously, there will be a discussion of alternatives in there, and then out of that evaluation will come a recommended plan. The plan will also identify other nutrient reduction plan components in each watershed. You are very familiar with those others as well. Based on that plan, we'll provide an overall cost estimate. It's a planning level cost estimate, not a detailed cost, not a bid-ready cost estimate, but an overall cost estimate and schedule so that the town can better prepare for overall project financing. We will be coordinating efforts among town departments, in particular, the Planning Department, the Board of Health, and the Water Quality Management Committee, not a town department, but a committee that is deeply involved with this. And so I've lost track of what I've said. Board of Health, Planning, and Water Quality Management Committee, as well as the rest of the DPW, because planning for these major infrastructure projects needs to take into account other work that's going on in other DPW divisions. This plan will also be phased and adaptive, so the idea is it will involve monitoring and opportunities for adjustment based on how things go over the planning period. Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act, or MEPA review. The watershed management plan is required to go through MEPA review because it exceeds certain MEPA thresholds, including more than 10 miles of potential sewer installation. The MEPA process is the process that's environmental, it's the state environmental review process. So the first step is an environmental notification form and a draft environmental impact report and a final. You're familiar with that as well. We're planning to submit the ENF, the environmental notification form, to MEPA by March 2nd of this year, so coming up very soon, to begin the environmental review process, basically to kick this process off. The ENF is a standard form that's used for all projects across the state, from like putting in a dock, a large dock, to, building a massive sewer system. So it's a standard form that doesn't apply equally well across all projects, but what we're planning to do is provide just that standard form plus the outline of our watershed management plan and DEIR for regulatory review. So part of the reason I'm here today is I'm seeking a water quality management vote to send that ENF, which includes the form and the outline for a watershed management plan and draft environmental impact report, to the select board and to the town manager for signature, from whence it would go to MEPA for regulatory review. Funds were appropriated at November 2025 town meeting for this draft watershed management plan and draft EIR. The scope of work for this project is shared. There are two separate agreements, one with Science Wares, so that we can take advantage of all of Kristen's background and work on this subject. And GHD has another scope, and the two are very closely linked, but they have separate tasks within this. In the draft plan and draft watershed management plan and DEIR are to be submitted by the end of 2026. We actually have it in our schedule now for November, but by the end of 2026. I anticipated an additional request in fiscal year 2027 for funds to finalize the plan and EIR. And then the watershed permit applications would follow. First, Little Pond and Great Pond, as you probably remember, or those are furthest along in every way, and also were the first that we committed to applying for permits for. Then the others would come on or before the dates that were the town previously committed to, through the end of 2029. So the draft outline for the watershed management plan and DEIR was sent to you. I apologize, not until this morning, late last night, something like that. That's on me. So I'm summarizing it here. The begins obviously with a project description, project background. Again, we're building on a lot of previous planning work to evaluate watersheds and plan for nitrogen reduction. There's also significant public participation and outreach as part of this process. There are state-designated environmental justice areas within those planning areas, so we will be reaching out to make sure we're communicating with people in those areas and with representatives of those areas. Again, I mentioned the various boards and committees that we'll be talking with or presenting to as appropriate. And there will be other public presentations and notices. The MEPA, or environmental review process, has official public notification and review processes, there will be additional communication beyond that. Also, in the beginning of this document, we are going to talk about the relationship between the watershed planning process and the outfall process. These are going on simultaneously, and they both are getting environmental impact review. The outfall is a little ahead as far as environmental impact review, because that's a big, long project that we really, we needed to get moving on its own. The two planning documents will reference each other and talk about the relationships, but they are separate documents. We submitted an environmental notification form for the outfall a while back and received the comments on that, and are now working on a draft environmental impact report for that project. But obviously the biggest connection between the two is related to wastewater flows and the timing of those flows. Section 2, so the basic, some of the material in this outline is required under the regulations. And that's part of why we have to prepare this plan, is that there are some requirements in the regulations that we haven't completed before. So we are going to update and summarize the water quality data and condition for all nitrogen-sensitive areas. Kristen's done a great job on that, and is quite a ways, is nearly done on. So we had, when those Massachusetts estuaries reports, were many of them issued more than 20 years ago, and there's been additional data, and Kristen's been updating the water quality data that we have and presenting, the trend over time, as well as updating the nitrogen load projections, or nitrogen load estimates. So to start with, we have what was in the Massachusetts Estuaries Project reports and TMDLs when they were issued. And Kristen is working to update those to current conditions based on water use over the last several years, 21 to 24 water use data. And this is a useful exercise because one advantage is it allows us to look at where we are now as far as water use compared to the build out that was projected then. And so we know what the water use was when the MEP reports were generated, and we know what the water use is now, and we can see where the now is compared to what was projected as build out 20 years from when those were made, which is right about now. So we are also looking to update these to the 20-year planning horizon. You'll notice that I'm calling the planning horizon 2030 to 2050, not 25 or 26 to 2050. And we are calling that the planning horizon because that's really the implementation timeframe for these. The watershed permits will be submitted by the beginning of 2030, and this allows us to start our planning horizon when we have new projects going in moving forward. Then from all that, you will be estimating the nitrogen load, updating the estimate of nitrogen load reduction for each watershed to meet the TMDLs. For all 14 nitrogen sensitive areas, we'll have current and future nitrogen removal targets. Again, the growth projections can be reevaluated over time based on actual water use. Section 3 is a description of management measures to meet the nitrogen TMDLs. You are familiar with this process, the alternatives analysis. The town has been through this a number of times. The difference is that we're looking at a larger area with all of these nitrogen sensitive areas, and we have we have a lot of background information on each of these. So according to the MEPA process, we have to include a no action alternative and ultimately what the impacts of that are. We'll look at alternative nitrogen management strategies, conventional nitrogen management strategies, and then consideration for future requirements. We'll identify TMDL compliance plan options and conduct a screening analysis. That you'll be hearing again about these by that time. This is not an independent, this is not something we come away from and do and come back. We'll come back with the screening of these options and communicate that. Section 4 is outlining the recommended compliance approach for the 14 nitrogen-sensitive areas and includes a nitrogen load reduction and the percent of the 20-year planning horizon removal requirement that will be met for all the watersheds. It's not going to be 100% for all of them. Obviously, the goal is to get 100% where we can, but something like Great Pond will likely require more than 20 years to accomplish. We'll also cover responsible management entities, and I know that's something this committee has a lot of interest in and will be discussed later on your agenda. There will be a planning level project cost for the compliance plan, and that will allow a more specific discussion, a more specific discussion of financing plans for this overall project. I attended a joint meeting of the Board of Health and the Water Quality the Select Board on Monday, as many of you did, and they were talking about financing options and the interest in outlining those. We will be doing that as part of this process and speaking publicly about that. Implementation schedule. We'll have an adaptive management framework, which means there will be phases for implementation and monitoring along the way so that the implementation can be adjusted as we go along. There are also, for specific technologies, we need to show that we have a plan for demonstration, testing, and acceptance or abandonment of selected technologies and decision-making on implementation of future phases. We also need to cover permitting and jurisdiction, consistency with the Cape Cod Commission's Section 208 plan, climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, and coastal vulnerability. That's all part of the environmental impact evaluations. Again, environmental justice, community input and impact is part of the discussion, and environmental impacts. I'm not getting into a detailed list of environmental impact review here. There is, as you probably saw in the outline, there are a lot of topics to be covered under environmental impact review. Section 5 and 6, Section 61 findings and mitigation measures are part of the MEPA requirement, part of the MEPA requirements, and then, of course, a conclusion. So, again, I'm here today seeking a vote to send the environmental notification form, including the outline for the draft watershed management plan and DEIR, to the Select Board and then to the town manager so it could be signed and submitted to the state, with the real meat of the discussion coming after that.
Thank you, Amy. I need to ask this board a procedural question. From every meeting that I have attended, we have allowed members of the public that are present to comment. We have a new one in that there are members of the public who are not present and have forwarded comments by email. I think we should develop, I'll put on the agenda for the next time around to develop a policy, whether you must be in attendance or not. But I guess for the interim, I would ask for a vote to at least take up the two items raised in an email and include them into today's comments. Okay?
You will be allowing comments from the people who are here.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
I just want to make sure you weren't doing just this and not the
No,
people who are
I don't want to, when we get past this board's viewpoint of what Amy's just done, and then open it up to the public, I didn't want to raise it at the last minute that I have comments by email, but I would like to put it on the next agenda to develop a policy, whether we feel you must be present.
But ad hoc today, I'll make a motion that we consider
allow.
Off-premises comments or whatever we want to technically call it.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Question, is that just, question, please, sir, before the vote, before I vote? Are these related to agenda items or
Yes.
some? Okay.
One of them is related to what we just heard, the other one's related to the Saxxon project. Okay,
Aye. I vote in favor.
okay. All those signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So, Ed, comments on what we just heard from Amy?
No, I think it's a good, compact, fast-track approach. I know a lot of work's gone into it. Excited to get the process moving and comply with the state regulations. There'll be a long comment process going forward for all of the public once it's posted in the environmental monitor. I think they give them 30 days to comment and then get a decision from the commissioner or whatever or the Secretary of Environmental Affairs, I guess. So good work, let's go.
Steve?
Amy, am I correct that what we're voting on is just what you actually presented on the screen and described, not any background documents?
It's to send an outline.
Which you showed.
I did. I summarized the outline. I mean, that's a summary of the
Yes.
outline. But yes, to send the outline.
But there's nothing in it specifying particular technologies or amounts
No,
thereof.
it's an outline of, sorry. There are no decisions in the outline, or you were forwarded the outline with this. It's a, no more than 4-page outline. And it's literally a table of contents for the watershed management plan and DEIR, which I summarized here in the slides.
Jonathan?
Amy, and I guess Kristen, you've done, I think, a well-organized, well-thought-out job here, and I'm fully on board with carrying it forward to the select board. I'm thinking of the work that's lying ahead for everybody involved in this in the next 20 years. It's a big deal, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you. So some of this work has begun as well. Like some of the analyses that we need to do, like I was saying, water quality, data analysis updates and load it, there's work going on that needs to be done. Thank you.
Jonathan?
I guess I had a clarification question. I mean, I think the outline looks great, but it's the timeline that goes with it. You mentioned the watershed permits wouldn't be applied for till 2030, but is the plan to just group all 14 together? Before there were 5 blocks of watershed permits that were going to be done. We grouped the different watersheds, but then we mentioned last fall, or you mentioned last fall, that you were going to then build one plan and then submit it. Is the plan then to submit the single plan for the permit at the point of 2030 as opposed to prior to that?
So we previously committed to a schedule, and we need to either meet that schedule or request a change in the schedule if we were going to do any of them, if we were going to submit any of them later than that. So the plan is to at least meet that schedule. It may be, so I think I said at a previous meeting on this watershed plan discussion here that I think there will be some ponds that are ready to move sooner and some that are ready, that are going to take longer. So the goal was to have a draft plan that covers everything.
Right.
And really, as we get to the end of that, I think we're going to have a better vision of how to finalize them and whether we want to change our strategy for requesting the watershed, applying for the watershed permits. So we have a grouping and a deadline for each group right now. If we want to change that, we need to apply for that or request an extension or a modification of that schedule.
So the first one was going to be submitted in 27, then 28, 29, 30. That's
Right.
still the plan. So by 2030, all these watershed management plans and permits will have been applied for, but some earlier than others.
Yeah, that's what we've committed to so far.
That's like-
If we want to change it, we
That's
can do
unchanged,
that.
yeah. Great.
Comments from, go ahead, Amy.
No,
Comments from the audience. Maggie got her hand up first. Maggie got her hand up first.
Chris Neal. So that was great. I thought that was great. It's a ton of work, and it was very clearly laid out. But I just have two questions. So when you're estimating, maybe this needs to almost go to Kristen. When you're estimating the reductions needed to meet the TMDLs, do you have the same MEP model that Brian Howe's used to calculate those reductions? And if you don't, how are you going to do it?
Kristen Rathjen, Science Wares. So GHD is actually looking at the water use numbers, and they are updating the wastewater loading. That's the primary term. We're also going back through some of the golf courses that have closed and adjusting the fertilizer loads. We're not rerunning the entire MEP. It's basically an update of the wastewater nitrogen contributions based on water flows.
So it's an update of the loading calculation, not the circulation.
Chris, just get to the microphone because we're recording.
So there are two pieces to these MEP reports, right? There's the watershed loading calculation, and then there's the estuarine circulation calculation that leads you in some way that I do not understand to estimating, how much reduction is needed to meet the TMDL at the Sentinel station. And that's the black box part to me, because I completely understand the watershed loading calculations, and I think you could update them, and that's fine. So it's just something to pay attention to. And my other question is, so the update to the data, which I think is important because some of these things are really old, is that comes from Center for Coastal Studies monitoring data and BBC data on the west side? Is that mostly NSMAST?
NSMAST does the South Coasts.
So
Center for Coastal Studies
does
does
like what-
Air Harbor. They also
Okay.
do some of the South Coast, and then BBC does Buzzards Bay.
The west side, yeah, okay. So it's a combination of those, of those things, yeah. Okay, all right. Oh, thanks.
Can I make one more? So we're not changing the TMDL. That mass is set. So we're just adjusting what we need to get the difference to.
Maggie?
Hi, Maggie McGaw, resident of Wacoit, and also speaking for Citizens for the Protection of Wacoit Bay. My question is very much related to Chris's. At many of the earlier meetings when Kristen presented the plans watershed by watershed, at the end of the conversation, somebody inevitably said, well, the numbers are going to change because those numbers go back to 2014 or whatever it was. So my question is, do you have a guess of when you're going to have new numbers? And because that is going to impact the number of houses that are going to have to go on IA systems or have some, I'm speaking about Wacoit Bay, the east side of Wacoit Bay, that won't be sewered. So what are the implications for areas like that may have a higher number to deal with? So that's my question.
I'm not sure that we are understanding one another in that, so Kristen's doing the analysis now based on, we have water quality data, so showing our water quality history. We have water use data, which is, different from what it was 20 years ago. So that's the main update. There's also, there's a couple of other land use considerations, like land that's been put into conservation that wasn't in conservation 20 years ago. We're not going through and doing a detailed lot-by-lot analysis. We're adjusting those larger factors. That will be done shortly and is going to be part of, so our overall plan will reflect that analysis. And so within this 1 year timeframe, we will have a plan that reflects that analysis. Does that answer your question? It's within this planning process. It's not beyond that we're doing that evaluation. Okay.
Matt?
Matt Hanley, 710 Thomas Landers Road. I appreciate that, the work that Kristen and Amy have put into this. One thing that I continuously bring up and is continuously ignored is that we need to, under this report, since we didn't pay attention to it last report, is large nitrogen contributors. All Cape Recycling, which is right above Walkway Bay, is contributing to the nitrogen, organic nitrogen, to the estuaries to the south of that. It's right on top of some of these estuaries that we're going to, it's in a nitrogen-sensitive area. It's contributing nitrogen. The town's leaf dump, blacksmith shop, stump dump, and with the current decision to do 7,000 IA systems in the town of Falmouth, that means 7,000 septic systems are going to be torn out. That material is compacted with PFAS, nitrogen, phosphorus, and that will be going to Thomas Landers Road, which is also in a nitrogen-sensitive area. We need to take that nitrogen contribution and phosphorus contribution and consider that. We need to do something to prevent that nitrogen from leaching into the watershed, and because we're basically just taking nitrogen from one area and contributing it to another area, so that needs to be factored in. If the town needs to work with Lawrence and Lynch or Aggregate Industries to install a lined pit to keep that nitrogen from leaking into the watershed, then that's something we need to think about now. We're planning for the future, and that's part of the future that we need to plan for. So, in addition to that, I'd like to see if I can get a copy of that draft watershed management plan and the DER outline, because I will be reviewing it and commenting on it. There was some, under the TASA report and under the original comprehensive water plan, there were some oversights about wetlands and MIPA areas that were overlooked. I want to make sure under the new plan that those areas are not overlooked again, and through the review process, working with the organizations that are ensuring proper protection to these areas of critical habitat and concern, that those areas are identified. So if Kristen or Amy, if you guys can get me a copy of that, I'd appreciate that. Let's see. I had one more concern.
So Matt, the presentation that Amy just gave, and the table of contents, they haven't done anything yet beyond the table of contents. Those will both get posted to the water quality management website.
Okay, awesome, great, I appreciate that.
It may take a few days, but yeah, everything from a meeting like this, we pass over and we post.
And if I can be kept in the loop as far as those meetings and public comment periods, I'd appreciate it. I will be very involved in that process. I just feel it's a duty to the residents of Falmouth to make sure that process is properly followed.
So as I said at the beginning, as they get to a point of anything substantive, okay. I don't know whether that's over the year they come in 4 times or 6 times or 8 times, but they will regularly be coming to this committee and providing a status update of where they're at, and they'll be open to public comment.
In all fairness, these reports, I've read every piece of literature that this committee has put out, and Amy and Kristen have put out. The TASA report by itself is 378 pages. To read that amount of content and to be notified in a short period of time is, when you have 2 full-time jobs, is a big, So if I can get out ahead of it and know when these public comment periods are before this is presented, I can read these and work with Amy and work with Kristen and make corrections of oversights, then it expedites the process, because then you don't have someone contesting your your documents, but it also gives me the ample time to gather my thoughts. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Based upon the earlier decision, I have received an email at 3:53 PM today from Earl Bernhardt and Hilda Mangay, and they said, under the proposed plan to prepare for an ENF, they state, please include approved eco-toilets. All eco-toilets divert urine, but not all collect urine, in the proposal to mitigate and reduce nutrient loads to reach TMDL. Our current study shows that the N&P concentration, as well as load, water use is measured of existing eco-toilet installations are better lower than the best IA systems. Okay. So, we need a vote of this committee. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay. Somebody want to read that out? What is the motion, Ed?
The motion is to support sending the environmental notification form, including the draft watershed management plan and the DEIR outline, to the select board and then to the town manager for signature, so it can be submitted to the state.
Okay, good. That's the motion. That's the motion that you seconded?
Yes.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously with one not present. Okay, good. Thank you to everyone. Okay. The next item on the agenda is going to be a quick one. It's information for this board. It's also information for people who've regularly paid attention to what we're doing. For the last several years, we've had a contract with Science Ware that funded the services of Kristen. That was funded, I think, Amy, correct me when I'm wrong, Article 17 from years ago, and some of the Air Force money was the source of funding for that. As of last year ending, there was only about $30,000 remaining. Past year services ran in the $40,000 to $50,000 range, and so we've got a new contract from Science Ware for this year, where Science Ware is specifically right now only tasked with doing support for the Snug Harbor PRB grant, as well as helping put together grants for things like the state grant program that comes out, but keeping the minutes, posting the agenda, or all the other things that Kristen was doing, where some of you guys would reach out and say, Kristen, can you tell me? That's no longer going to happen. So when the minutes come out after this meeting, I guarantee you they will not be as complete or as good, but I will do my best to make minutes that at least are readable and reflect at least a modicum of what we've done tonight. Okay?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
The last time we discussed this, it was my understanding that someone was looking into alternative funding to bring Kristen's services back to the previous level. Are you saying that that has failed?
I'm saying that in response to a letter from me pointing out the situation with Kristen to Amy and to the town's upper management, we got to the point where she's got a contract now to work on the PRB.
So it did fail to go to the full level?
I'm comfortable that we're not having to do the Snug Harbor PRB.
Failure isn't your fault. It's just a statement that there is no hope for returning it to the previous level.
Unlikely.
Okay.
Okay.
Additional comment from me. I'm very discouraged by the town position. When we were notified that the funding was gone, I was like, wow, I thought this was an important advisory committee to the town of Falmouth, and wastewater is probably the most pressing issue for the town going forward for the next several decades. And I would hope that the town fathers will consider finding a source to continue providing the administrative support and the technical support to the level of which the town has been accustomed for many, many years. A lot of money is spent in this town on a lot of things that really don't have the impact or the criticality of wastewater planning, and I would think it's such a pressing issue that a funding source so that it's continuous and not have to grab from here and there over the years going forward, a regular source of funding at an adequate level to provide that support is very important to the town of Falmouth.
Okay.
An audience question.
Go ahead.
Maggie McGaw again. My instant reaction to this is that losing Kristen's services at a moment when Amy and all of you are in process of preparing documents of such magnitude seems crazy. And so my question is, should we be mounting a campaign to bring people to the select board to advocate for?
I'm going to try to clarify. Kristen's going to continue to do a lot of what she did over the last year, but she's now working under a contract with the wastewater superintendent. She's a subconsultant to GHD, and no, do I have it wrong?
Sorry, I have a habit of reacting physically. I didn't mean, I'm like shaking my head. Just to be literal about it, there are two. The town has two agreements. One with GHD, one with Science Wares. Kristen Rathjen is working as a employee of Science Wares. Kristen Rathjen is working on the watershed management plan, and the watershed management plan is a major task in the jurisdiction of the Water Quality Management Committee. So what Steve's referring to is the support of this, the administrative support of this committee. So I'm not aware of other, I haven't done a survey, but I'm not aware of other town committees that have staff people, that administrative staff people. The Water Quality Management Committee has had a staff person, has been very fortunate to have a staff person, because that was funded through Article 17. And the Article 17 funds there's only $30,000 left in the Article 17 funds. So it's not that the town management has pulled something out from under the committee that was provided previously. It's really, it's an unusual circumstance that this committee was in because of that original funding source. The Article 17 of April 2011 was when that was passed, and that funding is now gone. So Kristen is very involved with watershed planning under a separate contract for that work.
Can I ask Amy a question?
Sure. Amy.
Is there a legal fudge to allow Amy to be paid from the GHD contract to collect additional information from us to go into the report?
Now, the contracts are for specific work. So they each have a scope of work. And this $30,000, 19 of it is going to be to support the PRB contract, and the remaining 11,000 is still to do grant support if that comes up, or other support for the committee. It's just $11,000 instead of $45,000 or $55,000, $45,000 to $55,000, which is what has been used in the past.
Okay. Go ahead, Matt.
Matt Hanley at 710 Thomas Lennis Road. I'm actually speaking as the environmental consultant for the West Falmouth Village Association on this one. I had an earlier conversation with Ed, and he said that I appreciate Amy's clarifying that the efforts for the PRB in Snug Harbor are going to continue. The West Falmouth Village Association stance has always been very clear that this PRB in Snug Harbor is going to make a big difference. We want to see that work be successful. We want to see that work move forward smoothly, and we feel it's very important to the health of West Snug Harbor and West Falmouth Harbor. So, we are very happy to see that work is going to continue in a productive and timely fashion. So, unfortunately, I'm sad to see that the board is losing a staff member. The work that's being done here really is important. It's probably one of the biggest and toughest issues to handle in this town. But sometimes when there's hardships, people need to consider things, and, the Freshwater Ponds Committee really should be being pulled into some of these discussions, and maybe it might be prudent to start, splitting the responsibilities between two committees, take some of the load off the Water Quality Management Committee. We're all talking about the same water. The water in the freshwater committees, the water from our fresh ponds and rivers ends up in our salt ponds, and so maybe it's time that the Water Quality Management Committee starts reaching out for assistance from other town committees, and also building better relationships with the Barnstable County and their partners as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Okay. The next item on the agenda is a continued discussion on the elements of a responsible management entity. John Waterbury's been working on this, and he reached out to me earlier today, said he's really not prepared to bring it forward at this time. So I would entertain a vote to pass on this item, and we'll add it to a future agenda when John is a little more ready to go.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor of passing on this item indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Next item on the agenda is a summary, if you will, of the Saxxon Easterly 375 Sandwich Road project. So lately, there's been some public comments, conversations, not involving necessarily me, relative to the 375 Sandwich Road.
Are you wanting to put it in presentation mode?
Yeah, where do I do that?
So, slideshow.
Oh, from the beginning.
And then you
Oh,
can
yeah,
use
up and down,
these
up and
arrows.
down, yep. So in pulling this together, I went back to some sources of information. I looked at the agreement and the stipulation for entry of final decision between Falmouth Southerly LLC and the Zoning Board of Appeals of the Town of Falmouth dated April 11th, 2025. I went to the Town of Falmouth Zoning Board of Appeals comprehensive permit modification dated April 4th, 2025. I went to the Town of Falmouth Zoning Board of Appeals comprehensive permit decision July 25th, 2024. I looked at the draft individual groundwater discharge permit number 1018-0 dated November 7th, 2025. And I went back to the Massachusetts Estuaries Project MEP documents for Great/Perch Pond dated April 2025. So the current reduction goal is to reduce the loading by 12,687 kilograms per year for the entire watershed. That value is based on the MEP reports, and it's only considering existing loading. The town did not include MEP reports build-out loadings when they did their last report on this. And as Amy covered earlier in this thing, the ongoing watershed planning will include build-out loadings, and is expected to generate a current conditions reduction goal, which will not be 12,687, but will be a different number, likely higher. But that number will not be available again until later in the year. So, making an effort at some nitrogen loading estimates for 375 Sandwich Road. If it was developed per zoning regulations, the MEP estimate of build-out loading was based on existing zoning regulations. 375 Sandwich Road was zoned for 1 acre zoning at the time of the MEP report, and it still is actually zoned for 1 acre. The parcel being developed has 28.79 acres. I took 28 single-family homes. In the MEP report, they had a value in the Great Pond area, an average value of 136 gallons per day per household, with 2-point-something persons per household. I don't remember what it was, 2.4 or 2.5, something like that. They also used the 35 milligrams per liter of nitrogen. And in the MEP report, there was some, I'm going to turn to Kristen, was it 10%? 10% didn't make, 10%, 25% attenuation. So with those factors, that calculated to 125 kilograms per nitrogen per year if it was developed at that time per the zoning. Alternatively, if we go to that parcel today with the 28 homes on it and the Board of Health's IA mandate and the 10 milligram per liter target, and again, the 136 gallons, the 10%, then the thing, that comes out to 36 kilograms of nitrogen per year. The easterly has a proposed wastewater treatment flow. The facility is sized per Title V. Title V uses peak flow rates. They have 185 single bedrooms at 110 gallons per day, 85 two-bedrooms, again, 110 gallons per day per bedroom, and 30 bedrooms. That equates to 48,950 gallons per day. I don't know where the discrepancy is in the groundwater discharge permit of 49,950. There is a clubhouse and a couple of rooms there, so it's probably, I don't have Fuss and O'Neill's documents to refer to, but it's close. The groundwater permit, the draft groundwater permit that is out there, has a total annual nitrogen load of 346 kilograms per year. So the design flow of 49,950 gallons per day, and in the permit, there are a couple of different numbers. The daily average discharge has to be 5 milligrams per liter over the year. That equates to 344.8. That should be kilograms, not grams, kilograms per year of nitrogen. The groundwater permit recognizes that this is a treatment facility and there is some variability in it, and it allows for variability in the effluent nitrogen concentration. But a 10 milligram per liter is sort of the maximum day or maximum value, okay? The plant, as designed, is designed to achieve 3 milligrams per liter for an effluent. And I did a little, sort of sensitivity thing. If the plant had 20 days per year at 10 milligrams per liter, 245 days at 5.22 milligrams per liter, and 100 days at 3 milligrams per liter would achieve the total annual load. And anybody that wants to go build a spreadsheet can move the numbers around and figure out how many days would you have to be at 3 milligrams per liter to make up for, but this is a little bit of my long experience with watching variability at various wastewater plants that, there's going to be some days where it doesn't perform well, but good operators will get it back in line pretty quickly. It'll come down and there'll be several days, and there'll be a bunch of days, particularly in the warmer weather in the summer, where it will run really well. Okay, and just so that everybody's working from the same information, I copied out a couple of conditions from the ZBA decision. Condition 13 in the ZBA decision says, "The applicant shall design and construct the wastewater treatment facility to meet an annual average effluent concentration of 5 milligrams per liter, with best operational efforts to achieve an average annual concentration of 3 milligrams per liter of total nitrogen." And then further down in condition 13, it says, I'm going to stop right here momentarily before I read this. The plan from Fuss and O'Neill showed a treatment facility, and it also showed a permeable reactive barrier. The permeable reactive barrier was very close to where the groundwater discharge was. And professional opinion, I wish we had our PRB expert here, but he's not, was that the permeable reactive barrier wasn't going to do much without some distance. I think we had a nice discussion here recently about the vadosome and travel times and what happens with nitrogen in the ground. So the PRB, where they could fit it on the site relative to the treatment facility, wasn't going to do much. So there's a paragraph in condition 13 that says, "In lieu of installing the permeable reactive barrier, the applicant shall provide funds to the town which will be used by the town to fund the implementation of the town's planned nitrogen offset measures within the Great Pond watershed. This contribution will consist of the applicant making a donation to the town of $750,000 within 30 days of receipt of the first certificate of occupancy on the property." So the town has not got that money yet. Town will not get that money until there's a certificate of occupancy. And then an additional item that's relative to nitrogen loading is condition 16 in the ZBA decision says, "The applicant shall provide a fertilizer restriction on the property in the manner prescribed by the town's wastewater superintendent or designee, so that it may be eligible for inclusion in the calculation of the town's nitrogen reduction measures." So, in summary, potential future loading at the time of the MEP report was 125. Loading based on current Board of Health, if it got developed as single-family homes, would be 36 kilograms per year. And the loading based on the groundwater discharge permit and 445 occupied bedrooms at peak flow would be 346 kilograms per year. Comment, Ed?
None. Disappointing that this is going to happen, but it's going to happen, so I think this is the best we could hope for. Do we know what type of plant, whose plant it will be? Is it Lamardo or?
I believe it's a membrane plant, so it's not a nitro or a nitrex. When I saw something, months ago, Steve?
Am I correct? This is a done deal. Even if we don't like it, there's nothing we can do.
Yeah, people have been talking. I just wanted to go through a summary of facts.
I'm not criticizing. I'm just trying to clarify.
Yeah.
For myself and anybody, it's a done deal. Even if we don't like it, there's nothing we can do about it.
The zoning board of appeal and everything that's, yeah.
My comment is, this is a good example of what we need to think about in the future. We don't just have to meet the TMDLs as they're defined today. We have to continue to meet those TMDLs in the future. So every one of these projects that comes doesn't mean if we've finished a watershed plan and we've sewered it and IA'd it, and all of a sudden there's a big project, we still are going to be responsible for maintaining that TMDL, and we will have to modify the watershed plan to reflect us being able to do that.
Tom?
I like the analysis. I don't like the results of the analysis, but I like that you took the time to pick through it and put it all on a reasonably understandable basis. Like John's comments, we've still got a lot of work ahead of us despite doing all the calculating and figuring and adjusting of different control mechanisms and stuff, that we're going to be faced with these going forward. People are going to come in and want to do big projects. John?
I guess the way I look at it is there's about 220 kilograms per year difference between what would have been part of the MEP report for single-family homes over those lots versus what we now have, the 6 kilograms per year. And I think about it as that's about 80 IA systems. You know, if each one's delivering 2.7 milligrams or kilograms per year of nitrogen, that's roughly $2.5 million of expense that this is added to clean up that nitrogen. And we're going to compensate the town with, what, $750,000 is the number? So we're falling far short of it, but it just says that we have to, you know, with Kristen's analysis, we almost have to take the high side numbers because of this unknown build-out component that's going to add more nitrogen. And if we want to be meeting the TMDL of the future, we can't be too conservative.
Right. So as I was putting this together, one of the things that sort of struck me is, you know, through whatever process the town and the developer reached, you know, a fairly lengthy decision that I just picked out the stuff having to do with wastewater. But relative to wastewater and nitrogen, there is no sort of formal policy that's been promulgated in the town that says what's the cost for nitrogen and what should somebody who's adding nitrogen into an estuary be obligated to pay. The only thing I've found so far is on the Martha's Vineyard Commission, they actually have a calculation sheet. So if you have a project of environmental concern that goes before them and you can't knock the nitrogen down to the level that they want you to get to, they've developed a calculation. I have not had a chance to kind of work through that yet, where then gets calculated what would the cost be. I would imagine that in order to develop something like that, it would have to get someplace into the zoning regulations or the bylaws. It would have to go through town meeting. But it may be something to put on one of our future agendas to begin. Maybe look at what Martha's Vineyard has done and see if that's a model to start from, okay? Comments from the audience? Chris?
Chris Neal, Marvin Circle. I have two comments. One is 40Bs can't overrule state law. State law, as far as I understand it, says that new wastewater discharge permits into watersheds of impaired waters, 303 listed waters, can't result in net nitrogen increases. So DEP should not be issuing a permit that doesn't have specified offsets. That 346 kilograms per year should be zero. And the state law says it should be zero. So I don't think the answer is you can't do anything. You could argue this DEP permit. I guess that was my point. And the town wrote a letter saying we'll accept this $750,000 and we'll throw it somehow without details as far as I understand it. So are there details behind the offsets that $750,000 will require? Because DEP's permit should, I think, specify those offsets, and they shouldn't be issuing a permit that doesn't get you to net zero nitrogen in an impaired water without some specificity to what the offsets are actually going to be. So I think you have the teeth in the state law. Thanks.
Matt Hanley of 710 Thomas Landers Road. I actually attended all of these ZBA meetings, and I spoke up for the residents of Falmouth. We're being penalized for this development. It's, you know, I had wrote a letter to the Board of Selectmen. I believe it was shared with this committee and Amy Lowell. And, you know, there was a number put out that of 1.25 miles to hook into the sewer, the force main. But in reality, that's the existing force main, not the not the future force main was approved recently. The new force main that's going down Blacksmith Shop Road, Brick Kiln Road, is a half a mile away. I think the town should do a better job of working, with planning and see these projects as they're coming down the board and start planning for the eventuality that that they might need to be tied in and come up with some kind of zoning regulation that calls out future projects that they get charged for the sewer equivalent units. So this project here, I don't know if the number was 84 basically homes. This would be the equivalent of 84 homes. So that would be 84 sewer equivalent units if this was to be tied into the existing wastewater system. Now, I do realize from attending as many meetings as I have here with the Water Quality Management Committee that there are calculations on discharge and flow, and that the process to change the calculations for a discharge permit is lengthy. But, we just approved a $60 million sewer expansion, and part of that nitrogen that we're taking out is being offset by this Saxxon property, which is unfortunate. It's, the other comment that I'll say is that this $750,000, should be put into, John, I know you're working on a responsible management, a SUP, possible SUP for this town. The sewer utility program would be a non-government organization that works under or with the Town of Falmouth. That $750,000 could be put as seed money for this SUP, and that seed money could be used to help the abutters and other residents in that watershed to get some kind of stipend to put IA septic systems in that watershed. I would like to see that money used in that way, and I feel that this is an important thing that the board should be thinking about. So, John, I just, if you've heard my comments, hopefully that, you'll put some consideration into that when you do your presentation in an upcoming meeting, that $750,000 could be help homeowners afford, because that watershed in East Falmouth, that's some of the most, economically challenged areas of our town. And so if those homeowners could get assistance with their upgrading their septic systems, the IA septic systems, through a SUP and that $750,000 offset plan, that would be very helpful to helping with affordable housing here in this town. Thank you.
I should know your name, but it's just, I'm getting old and just escaped me. You're not enough of a regular.
Yeah, Wendy Bissler,
Wendy, thank you.
here as president of the Coonamessett River Trust. I would just like to echo what Chris had said. This shouldn't be net zero change. This amount of nitrogen coming into the Coonamessett River watershed should be zero. It's ridiculous. I think you do, we do have some teeth to require this to be zero. And my worry is, yes, there was agreement worked out that $750,000 would be used to offset this amount coming in, but my worry is it's not going to be enough. And that as a taxpayer, I'm upset that I may have to subsidize this huge development, one of the biggest developments in Falmouth, and the developer is going to make money off this, but yet we have to pick up the cost of the impact to the environment. And I think that's just wrong, and it's very, very unfortunate. So I do hope that, yes, the money that we have received will help offset the lower income taxpayers in this town and help them out to pay for this. But I really hope in the future that the town can deal with these 40Bs in a better manner to not allow the taxpayers to have to pay for, subsidize their development. Thank you.
I think Amy wanted to say something first.
I think this is not the town's fault or the town's, there's two conflicting state laws, and the town is stuck between them. There's 40B and there is the watershed permit regulations under the for clean water. So I believe this is a legislative issue, not a town issue. The town did what it could within its power, and I think that if the town wants this modified, it needs to go to the state and it get changed at the state level.
Steve?
I'm very happy to hear what Chris and Wendy are saying, and I hope they're right. And in lieu of the fact that we can no longer call on Kristen to do this, I'd like the board, the committee, to encourage Chris and Wendy to research whether in fact Chris's statement about DEP is true and how we cause the teeth to clamp down. If, obviously, as volunteers, I can't make anyone do anything.
Yeah, there is a defined comment period associated with the draft permit that was issued, and somebody other than me may have the date, but if it's not this Friday, it's next Friday. It's passed. It's passed. Yeah. So.
And Christmas.
Huh?
We submitted a letter.
CRT submitted a letter.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, there's several letters were submitted. The Association for Preservation of Cape Cod submitted a letter, and consistently reiterating the point you made, Chris, about the conflict in the state laws. We'll see where the DEP comes out.
Steve, can I just ask one more question of Amy? I understand your point that it's a legislative issue, but did the town negotiate the $750,000 that was going to be then used to offset these nitrogen credits, or was that something that was beyond the town? Because if it's the town, we need to learn so we don't repeat the mistakes in future.
Yeah, I think I'm going to take this one if I can. I read you from the decision. So the ZBA retained outside counsel. You know, the first time they came down with a decision, the developer took it to an entity in Boston, which then forced a mediation adjudication for the parties to reach an agreement, okay? There's layers upon layers inside the final agreement and final conditions, and then that became a legal document, okay? So the drilling down into, you know, where do numbers come from? I mean, you know, I read you the thing about the fertilizer. I mean, to my knowledge, it's the only development in town that agreed to that condition, you know, to not use fertilizer. And that's worth something. I don't know what it's worth. I don't think it's worth 346 kilograms per year, but it's worth something.
I just want to make the rather sad point that if we're looking at nitrogen removal remediation / whatever, the $750,000 would buy 15 IAs right now at market prices. 15.
Yeah.
15 houses at 9, what is it, 9 pounds a year under Title V? Septic 7?
2.7 is what
2.7.
you get credit for a septic, IA septic system.
Right. So what I'm saying is,
So Tom, earlier I suggested that we kept developing, you know, that on a future agenda, if you're all willing to, we should look at what they're doing in the vineyard, look at that formula, and, you know, it's going to take time to get it through as a zoning bylaw and everything else.
Right.
But I think this committee could be proactive by having learned from what just transpired and developing something that, you know, the ZBA is not having to invent it or guess at it or do
Right.
whatever else.
My only suggestion would be to schedule the island trips during the summer. Out of personal interest.
They say all of Cape Cod is very nice in the summer. Okay. If there's more, there's no vote on this at all. This is information
Yep.
just out there.
And thank you for doing it, Steve.
Mr. Rafferty, can I make a comment?
Specifically to the Saxxon and the nitrogen.
Yes. You know, I can appreciate that this board would make a trip to the island to look at a nitrogen offset plan, but the town of Falmouth, our town, I continuously bring this up, and it's never acknowledged by the board. This town pays for a nitrogen offset plan in West Falmouth Harbor. We don't need to study another town. We just need to look at the legal agreement that the town of Falmouth has signed with the Buzzards Bay Coalition for their nitrogen offset plan, and the way that that nitrogen offset plan is administered. So, you know, let's apply the same logic that the town of Falmouth is paying to another non-government organization to offset, apply that to Saxxon. The same, when we sat here with the Saxxon property and we were discussing it, they said the Saxxon property should be able to treat their wastewater to the same standards of the town of Falmouth. Their nitrogen offset plan should mirror our nitrogen offset plan for West Falmouth. Thank you.
Okay. All right. The next item on our agenda is a summary of the Nobska Oyster, I think.
Nobska Light.
Nobska Light.
Oyster.
Oysters. Yeah.
On a personal note,
Typo there.
on a personal note, Matt and Sarah decided to celebrate where they were married, which was at Nobska Light, so they made that the name of their new brand of farmed oysters. But anyway, I don't have all of the data from all three of the contracted growers, but Matt's letter, which was a very nicely done letter that covered his payment to the town and talked about what was going on there. I'm just going to very quickly summarize a couple of key points that he raised and that he raises, and let you know that the big report is still in the works. Now, first of all, the bad news. You've heard me say year after year that it's a tremendous success story and things are really zooming along after this horrible. The first year was 2020, and that was the year of COVID, and there was no market for oysters on the half shell, no high-end product, and so basically that year was a waste for the growers. This year, and this is only applying to Matt's situation because I don't know what happened with the other growers yet, had a 51% decrease in harvested oysters over last year. And the big worry in the past has been things like disease and bad weather and things like that. The main reason for their low harvest was late in the year. I'll tell you the dynamics of the oyster harvesting. They harvest some in the summer and they sell some in the summer. But late in the year, there are two really big deals, the holiday sales around Thanksgiving and particularly around Christmas. And in December, the CDC announced that there was a salmonella epidemic sweeping the country in raw seafood, without specifying that, one, this was data back from June scattered throughout the year up until the time they made this announcement. They never pinned down the source. This crushed oyster harvesters, or shellfish harvesters, because it just said seafood. It didn't say shrimp. It just said you could get a very serious salmonella poison case from seafood. The market is already sort of at its limit. There's been many more producers entering the market over the last several years, and they've been able to grow the market somewhat, but this tanked it, and this is the main reason they couldn't afford to harvest the oysters in late winter, just before Christmas. This, I think, came out the first week in December, this announcement, and so the market collapsed, and that's the biggest single reason for these low numbers. Now, the good numbers are even with this having the rug pulled out from under them by what I'm calling an extrinsic factor, they still met the town's harvest target by 7%, looking at the whole year. They were meeting those numbers, and they sold a total of just over 300,000 oysters from that half-acre lease. Now, keep in mind that that's half of what they have been doing. There's been an amazing success story there. And the total weight was 36,000 pounds of oysters. More good news is over the 5 years, they've paid about $80,000 in rent to the town of Falmouth. This is just coming from one grower, $79,700 and something dollars for the rent of the town equipment. And the agreement is that this income to the town enters the town's revolving shellfish account, which buys seed quahogs. Now, keep in mind that quahogs are sequestering nitrogen also, but we've focused on oysters because oysters can do it in about 18 months total, from a spring put out in, say, April of one year to the harvest starting late summer through the fall the following year. Quahogs, per quahog, sequester the same amount of nitrogen as an oyster, but it takes them 3 years to do it. So the focus has been on the rapid return with this. But these millions, and I mean it's millions of baby clams every year are put out for commercial harvest and for recreational harvest. It's been very, very successful. The town is doing a bunch more projects to increase the survival. You may have seen some of their netting projects around town where they put out thousands of quahogs and then cover them with a 1/4-inch mesh, very firmly anchored, and it's been a success except the Wild Harbor site. There was so much wave action that it got wiped out completely there. But tremendous increase. That's the thing you can do when you're buying baby shellfish of any kind, but in the case of quahogs, one that's 10 or 12 millimeters instead of 6 or 7 millimeters probably has 3 times the chance of survival. It's the little tiny one. So they've been able to protect them that way. So that's another return that we're not even accounting for in our nitrogen budgeting in the removal process. Now, the 5-year summary, he has in one paragraph here, in five years, they've harvested not quite 2 million oysters, 1.97 million oysters, with a total of 236,000 pounds of oysters. And over the 5 years, those oysters grew from seed oysters. The cumulative over the 5 years, they've started with less than 1,000 pounds of seed oysters. So you go from less than 1,000 pounds to 236,000 pounds. So it's a system that really works. And over the 5 years, his project alone, by his numbers, he used a slightly different method than I do, but they're really comparable. A total of just over 600 pounds of nitrogen has been removed from Eel River over that time period. He's making a special plea, and he's tried himself, and there's major interest in town to try to get beyond this monocultural approach to oysters. They're working with scallops. He and several others have tried kelp farming. The problem is the places where you have the space to put the kelp farm, there's not enough nitrogen and other nutrients in the seawater to have really good growth of that, because they're out in Vineyard Sound, mostly with those projects. So anyway, that's a real brief report with what's going on there and some of the problems they're facing. And again, we'll wait and see what the other numbers look like from the other 2 growers. And I'll report on that in the near future. The last time I checked, this stuff was still in the works.
Well, thank you for that.
Questions from
Thank you for that, Tom. I got to backtrack momentarily because I got comments on the Saxxon thing that I didn't
Oh,
read.
I'm sorry.
No.
Should I stop now, or you want to wait till I finish the questions from the board?
I'm going to do it after we get done with questions from the board.
Okay, Steve, you had a comment, or?
2 questions. When there's you said that in that 1 year, I guess it was last year, late in the season, they could only harvest 50% of the oysters.
Right.
What happens to the 50% they don't harvest?
They have to leave them out there, except it gets to be a problem in some cases. They get too big for the containers. They have, in some cases, landfilled them. That's what happened in 20, the COVID year. 300,000 oysters were landfilled, harvestable oysters.
It's not that you can save the money on planting new ones the following year.
No, because I've been directly involved with projects where with the town, the ones growing for the town that we put out in West Falmouth Harbor, were left too long in the bags, and they grow through the mesh of the bags. So we went out with improvised hammers and other tools to break the projecting part of the oyster shells off so the oysters could then be pulled out of the bags that they were growing in, which is not an efficient way to harvest thousands of oysters.
And the other is a miserly financial comment by me.
Yeah.
It sounds like the town's in rent is just covering a fraction of the town's expenses. There's a negative return on investment for the town.
I don't think the town really has expenses now. The bags are built.
Well, you're saying the rent goes entirely into the seed, which is then
Right.
essentially given free to the oyster people.
No.
It's a very good deal for
It's
the
not,
oyster.
no. The oyster people buy their own seed. Matt's already committed to spending 30, he's already said what his projections are for the coming year.
Well, he's
already committed to.
He may buy other seed, but you said, maybe I misunderstood you. I thought you said that the $80,000 or whatever.
No, it goes to buy seed cohogs that are put out for the public and commercial harvesters, not for aquaculture purposes. So, and there's been tremendous volunteer input into this project all along, building the bags, and it's worked out real well.
I just think you should be alert to the possibility of regulatory capture. You know what that is? That's when an industry that's being regulated
Right.
has an undue influence on the government body that's regulating it.
Right.
In this case, the tenant may have an undue influence on the landlord.
The tenant is unhappy because they are required to use the town's equipment and facility. They have to accept what the town sets as rent. You can't show up and say, I'm going to grow oysters here using my own equipment. Matt doesn't use a bunch of the town equipment, but he still has to pay the rent. He overwinters his own
Well,
seed.
the rent isn't just for the equipment, it's also the permit to use that area of water body.
Right. The rent is 7 cents an animal. They just pay one flat fee per animal harvested, but once they harvest 208, if I remember this right, 282,000, they don't owe any more rent beyond that. That's why it's the same fee every year, regardless. And of course, they're going to grow as many oysters as they can. They grow, I would say, typically 400,000 to 600,000 oysters per half-acre plot per year. And it's worked out really well, and now we're looking at trying to expand it, but we'll hear more presentations. Questions from John?
I wonder if we couldn't, when we get situations like that where we have large oysters which are not harvestable, can we use them to start reefs?
Use them what?
To start a reef?
We're doing that in West Falmouth Harbor. They've already got a reef established there that's
Yeah, but could you use them in other areas if you can't harvest
Right.
seed someplace else?
Yes.
And start a reef?
Right, and much of this has been based on volunteer labor. Like I said, when we were cleaning out the town's equipment by hand, it's backbreaking work, but yeah, but you'd have to have provisions to gather them and transport them and have a plan. But yes, no, that's a very good idea.
All I would say is, what about that $750,000 of Saxxon money? Could that be used to buy a whole heck of a lot of oysters?
Would have to be in Great Pond. The money's specific for Great Pond.
Great Pond has a lot of locations that they've recognized as potential oyster locations, right?
They have not yet gone through the Division of Marine Fisheries.
Yeah, it's the biggest target right now we have is Great Pond because it has the biggest option. You can't put floating gear over commercially productive shellfish territory and the state definition of productive shellfish territory is 1 bivalve per square yard. Now, no one in their right mind is going to go in and commercially fish a spot where there's 1 clam per each square yard, right? I mean, who would ever do that? But that's the definition. So we can't, so we're limited to the parts of these ponds where what's politely called black mayonnaise. There's other terms for it. They're really black anaerobic sulfuric mud. And they've carefully surveyed and found the spots, and Great Pond is the big one. The drawback with floating gear is you get a lot of pushback from other users of the water body, people that would like to water ski or sail or look at an unimpeded waterscape anyway. But yeah, we're pushing. There's a bunch of spots that are under consideration. It's going to be on a multi-year schedule, but even at its best, if I remember the numbers correctly, they think that oysters may meet 6 or 7% of our numbers, I think is what was in the big plan years ago. I'm going back a long ways, but.
I'm just trying to get to the 220 kilograms of excess nitrogen that's coming out of the Saxxon property.
Right, oh yeah. I know, it would be great. It would be great, so. Anybody out there? Everybody wants to go have some oysters now, right? I've got a bunch at home right now from West Falmouth. They're wonderful. Good. So that's it, Steve.
Okay. Going back momentarily to item 5, there was a comment that was received from Earl Bernhard and Hilde Mange at 3:53 p.m. today. Under the Saxxon project, their comment that they wanted entered to the record was demand that the construction should be urine diversion ready. Cost of plastic pipe is negligible. Okay. Kristen used to keep track of various environmental actions by other communities and agencies. Ed agreed that he would keep his eye open for what was out there. We have 7 minutes in. Yeah. Okay?
We still got to do minute approval, but okay.
I can kick you to the next meeting, or?
No, I can throw some highlights out there that I think might be of interest to people. One, because of the discussion we had earlier by Amy about the permitting process and the filing with MEPA, Wareham filed last fall with an EENF, which is an enhanced environmental notification form for a comprehensive wastewater management plan. That went under the MEPA review process, the comment period for that. And what happens is when it is published in the Environmental Monitor, that then triggers a opportunity for public review. The documents are attached to the filing so that you can read the hundreds of pages or however many there are, and then comment over typically a 30-day period. So the comment period for the Wareham plan ended on January 22nd, and they received about 80 comments. Now, the gist of the Wareham plan was they're not sure what they're going to do. They're going to do, but they're dependent on extensive sewering beyond what they already have, expansion of the capability and capacity of their wastewater treatment plant, and finding a new place to dump it. They have an existing outfall that is damaging an already distressed estuary, and they need to have a bigger new one. They'd like to put it in the Cape Cod Canal, and most of the 80-odd comments received were, don't do that, oh my God, you're going to screw up the canal, you're going to screw up Buzzards Bay, Cape Cod Bay because of wastewater. People not understanding, and will face this once the outfall permitting process moves forward. People saying, what are you putting out there? Not understanding that it's clear water that has 3 parts per million on the average of nitrogen. So that's the kind of feedback they got. There was some feedback from state agencies and other environmental groups about the overall plan. Interesting to note, Wareham did not plan on any extensive use of IAs. They were purely going flat out sewer, baby, sewer, dig. So that is, with the process, what the public comment period is and how it works and where Wareham stands with their planning going forward. Mashpee, our neighbor, has received a SRF, State Revolving Fund, dollar approval in the order of magnitude of $50 million for their ongoing sewer work. They've been doing a lot of digging. Anybody that drives 28 has seen it. They started their next phase of sewering this week, digging in the area, Great Neck Road North, Route 1 up to 130, and primarily east around the Mashpee-Wakeby Pond zone and Santuit Pond. So that where Mashpee is moving forward and continuing sewering. Yarmouth, they have been sewering for a while. Again, if you go out to Yarmouth, they've been making a mess of Route 28 for a couple of years. Their plan is over a 40-year plan, 8 phases of 5 years each. So they're going to be digging up around Yarmouth for the next 40 years, and we know how heavily populated that is and all the commercial usage. A company called Rivoli Construction was one of their prime contractors. They had a tragic fatality at one of their dig sites this past fall. OSHA's still investigating. Rivoli has been given the okay by the Town of Yarmouth to restart at the site of the fatality, with the stipulation at Rivoli's expense, they will have an on-site public safety officer watching everything they're doing. Hopefully it'll prevent another tragedy. Rivoli, thank goodness, was not a successful, I don't know if they even bid on the Falmouth work, but we're on the verge, I guess, of starting our construction for the Great Pond Phase 1. So I had a couple others, but in the interest of time, I think that's enough, but a couple of points of what's going on out there.
I'll put you sooner in the agenda next time. The next item is reports of members and staff. I have one very, very quick item. On January 20th, we received word that a grant that Kristen put in with the natural resource nitrogen-sensitive area grants for $7,182 to do the QAP. So we have all this data, but the sort of check of the data and the way it was collected, the way the analysis were done to ensure that the data is accurate, we did not have a QAP plan in place. We applied for it, we got the money, and that money all rolls up to SMAS or somebody, right? So, but good work on getting a grant. Thank you. All right, last item.
One very quick.
You got 1 minute.
30 seconds.
You got 1 minute.
The Urine Diversion Committee has disbanded.
Oh,
The project is entirely in the hands of Mass Test Center, and there's no agreement between the town and any of the participants.
Good to know.
diversion has been dispersed.
Diverted.
Okay, minutes from January 7th. Everybody got a copy of the minutes? Any comments on it?
I move we approve them as submitted.
Okay. There's a motion been made and seconded to approve the minutes of January 7th. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passed. Take a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yeah.
Second. All right, we gotta get this down in here. Ed, Steve, on the minutes, who made the motion?
Me.
Ed, who seconded it?
I'm willing to volunteer a second.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.